Welcome everyone to another episode of the podcast, The Attacking Two. I'm your host, Jimmy Funnell, and I'm joined as always by my fellow host, Andy Martin. And today also, and I'd like to give a warm welcome to special guest, Felipe Miranda, a fellow writer at We Ain't Got No History, who'll be joining us today to speak about Crystal Palace and the upcoming transfer window. So, without further ado, you know the question.
Are you listening? Damn. Yeah.
So, before we start, I'd like to plug our guest, of course, even though I'm sure you will have read some of his articles already on We Ain't Got No History. You can follow him under @Brazfoot on Twitter, and of course, read his articles at weaintgotnohistory.com. You can, of course, also find all our plugins, so also from Andy and myself, in the description. Okay, so first of all, we're absolutely delighted to welcome you on our podcast, Phil. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine. It's a quite hot summer here in Brazil, and it's a quite hot night. So I'm trying to enjoy the conversation because the climate is just it's very difficult to handle. But I'm doing quite well, especially for Chelsea win today, of course.
Yes, sir. I mean, let's get straight into this. I mean, what were your first thoughts at full time, Phil? Who was your man of the match?
Man of the match for me was certainly Kante. He's just, amazing. I was talking with Shaurias, who's a fellow writer at We Got No History, about how we needed someone like Hamsik, midfielder who would run from behind to enter the box. And at the minute I spoke about that, Kante did the run to score today's goal. I mean, I'm just amazed by how awesome he is. He recorded so many interceptions and tackles, and most of them were in Palace half. And he just baffles me, his quality and how he constantly evolves and takes the next step in his game. He's constantly evolving, and I mean, I just love Kante.
I can only wholeheartedly agree. I mean, it's very hard to see this Chelsea team without N'Golo Kante nowadays. I mean, would you agree with Phil's assertion, Andy?
I would, on the point of N'Golo and Kante. I enjoyed his performance today. I think that run is not an N'Golo Kante run. I've never seen him doing that, at least not to this perfection. Finishing like a striker. And you see with N'Golo Kante, he is a man of many traits. He can do things no one else can. Not meaning that he has natural talent in all departments, but he can learn everything. And that's what I tried to say to people when they said, all right, he's playing out of position. That's not the Kante we want. That's not the Kante of last season. Give him time and he will adapt to the position and he will cause some goal threat, which we haven't seen at the start of the season. But now we see that and he can do that. So people chill out. On all the other parts and all the other players today, I really have to say it was painful to watch at times because maybe I tell a little story out of my life because I was skiing today as we are living in Austria.
Lucky
we tend
bastard.
to do that. And with a Liverpool friend of mine.
Boo!
We were sitting there watching the game after skiing. And for the first time in my life, and I know him for quite some time, I was ashamed to watch Chelsea in front of a Liverpool fan because I felt our performance, especially the passing in the second half, was just piss poor. When I watched Marcus Alonso, I was always praying to myself that he doesn't embarrass me in front of my friend. It was painful to watch at times. Barkley wasn't to the standards today. Even Jorginho. But I felt we did what we had to do to clinch a win at Crystal Palace, and we tend to not win there. So overall, I have to be happy. So I think on that note, I can hand it over to Jimmy. What do you think about the win of today?
Well, I wouldn't have seen it that harshly. I mean, we didn't play perfect. I'll agree with that. But the first half, we clearly dominated. It's only the same problem as always. No end product. That's been the problem all along, and that is why we will also address that in the next part. Then when we talk about the transfer window, we do need reinforcements in the attacking department. But I thought the link-up play between the midfield and the wingers was quite good. I'm a harsh critic of William, but he played quite well at times in the first half. He was actually one of our better players, and I say that as said as one of his critics. But in the second, he dipped in form. He was rather inconsistent again, and every time when it happens that he tries to dribble out of our penalty box or near our penalty box and then gets dispossessed, that drives me mad. That was the only really thing that I say that was negative. I mean, those last minutes where they came at us, that was always going to happen. That they throw the kitchen sink at us, but generally, I thought it was quite good. I mean, one of the highlights also in that game was when Kepa came out and once again, like Pam, passed it and it went right to the man, pinpoint.
Yeah.
That
There's
was
a lot
so
of that,
good.
and I think he's a bit underrated about it because
Yeah,
I mean we had so many years of Courtois, and one thing that I always criticized about Courtois was his passing, his distribution, which is so
definitely.
poor, so poor. He's always, launching balls towards the sidelines. He's never hitting his targets. It's just, it's just amazing that he's a top goalkeeper. Certainly, he's just a top shot stopper, but he's so poor with his feet. And Kepa is like amazing with his passing. I think the 70 million investment we made on Kepa, 70 or 80 million. I think it's 80 million euros. But nonetheless, it's because of that, because he adds this dimension to his play. And we see with Alisson and Ederson how important it is to have a ball playing goalkeeper, and we have that with Kepa. I don't think he's fully grown into his role yet, but he's shown that with these passes. I think he can be a very good threat from that department, such as Ederson is at City. And but as you said, the passes he hits. I mean, there are a few times where he takes a few passes wrong, but I'm not sure if it's all his fault. I think at times it's because of the player positioning. The receptor of the ball, because the guy isn't in the position that he's expecting the guy to be, and then he misplaced the pass. But I'm really, really fond of Kepa, of everything he's shown, and he's only 23, right? So he's only
Yeah.
have room to grow. It's amazing. It's one of the purchases that I'm most excited about over the last few years that we made.
And as they say, stats don't lie. And when you look at the stats, Kepa has the best pass completion rate of all goalkeepers in the Premier League. So
Does
on
he?
that note,
Really?
yeah, he has.
Wow.
I've seen it the other day. That's just in his first season as a young goalkeeper with the pressure of having an 80 million price tag on his shoulders. It's just amazing.
Yes, and playing in the Premier League for the first time in a team that is constantly under pressure. It's not like Alisson and City where the opponents don't even try to press them because they know they will break them. Chelsea, speaking about the game itself, I agree with Andy here because I didn't really like the performance because we had so much space to work with, and we just had Jorginho playing those diagonal passes and sideline passes, but we didn't see him doing much of that incisive pass. I mean, he did that, but he doesn't do that as often as he did in Napoli, and I think it's one of the reasons why we brought him, because he was meant not just to be the regista to conduct the team, but also to be this guy to fill in Fabregas' shoes, and he isn't doing that yet. I feel like he's being a bit one-dimensional at times, even he's too safe. Which is, I won't complain about him being too safe, but I feel that one of the reasons why we don't produce as much attacking wise is that there's the aspect of us needing a Hamsik type of player, which Kante is slowly becoming one, and also Jorginho not playing these passes that Fabregas used to do. I mean, maybe with time that will be addressed because I know he can do these passes. When I was watching Napoli last year, and he didn't get a lot of assists, but he usually got the second assist. He was the one setting up the assist for Insigne or for Mertens. So I mean, I have hopes for him, but as of now, I'm not really fond of how Jorginho has been. His performances thus far for us.
I have actually a question regarding the game for you two today. I was kind of uh, not really surprised as Pedro wasn't included in the squad today that we start a striker. It obviously was Giroud who we started. But then I was a little bit surprised, not that Morata featured on the bench because we tend to do that when we play a striker, that we have another one on the bench. But as he was substituted, like he entered the field for Giroud as the first substitute today, is that maybe a sign that he is not going to leave? Because last time we've talked to Yannick, he said, well, it seems like he's going to be wrapped up for a loan transfer as he's not included in the squad and is kept like physically fit for medical. Does it look like maybe we are not going to do that on the basis of him playing today in the game? What do you think, Jimmy?
That's a really hard question. I mean, I think that's a question that will only really get answered once the transfer window starts. It's anyone's guess. I think the only thing what does speak against that is we just don't have anyone else at the moment. I mean, I think the next option will be Deshaun Redden, if I pronounce him correctly.
Yeah.
So it's as bad as that. With Pedro, he could play the false nine role theoretically. We haven't got Hudson-Odoi. Loftus-Cheek out injured. I mean, not that it would make a difference, but Drinkwater and Moses also, and Fabregas being injured was also a problem because in theory he can play on the wing. I wouldn't want him to, but he can. Yeah, he played.
Are you sure?
Yeah, no,
his Arsenal days he played there when
he played for us on the wing several years ago. I know I wouldn't want him to play, but in theory, he could at least go into the midfield and Barkley could go out on the wing because he did play that, not very successfully, but he did play that at Everton. But, we haven't got the options at the moment. That's the problem. So I think it was more or less he had to. But if you looked at Morata's, the way he played, it wasn't really with enthusiasm as much. I don't want to, maybe he was motivated and all that, but you didn't really see it. He didn't win any balls.
Mate, that is how good as he can. That's his standard.
That's maybe as good as it gets with him, and that is of course a problem, though, undoubtedly. But I wouldn't discard the chance of him leaving in January just because he played today. Because I think with Giroud also out injured, I could very much imagine that he plays against Southampton because Pedro might. Well, Hudson-Odoi is pretty certain to be out. Pedro might still be out. Probably will be. We can only hope that Loftus-Cheek is back so that we can play Hazard at the false nine again. I mean, today everyone was clamoring for Hazard to come back to the left wing, and I got to say I liked him more at centre forward than today at the left wing. I know he got more of the ball, but
It was a bit difficult because I mean, I don't know if you noticed, but Wan-Bissaka, the right back. He's pretty good. He's 21, and he was just locking down Alonso's wing, Alonso's moves forward at his attempts. And Eden, I think he was a bit affected by that, because he didn't have a lot of support from Alonso. Whenever Alonso touched the ball, when Bissaka would come close and approach him to avoid him, to close down, to press him, to avoid him to make the second pass. And Eden didn't get as much of the ball in the positions he likes to get it from the left wing as much as he did, because there's also that because Palace didn't defend. They didn't defend compact. They didn't defend compact in terms of width. They sat deep, but they also distributed themselves among the pitch to close down the spaces on the flanks. So when we had Alonso or Aspilicueta trying to come in with the crosses, they didn't have much space to do that, which was quite smart by Hudson. We have
Yeah.
to give props to them. And I mean, though the problem, I'm putting air quotes here with Premier League teams. Speaking as a Chelsea fan, is because they are smart. They aren't stupid. They know their strengths and they play to their strengths. We saw that against Leicester. And we saw that today. If it wasn't for that marvelous pass from Davi and that marvelous run from Kanté, we wouldn't be talking about a 1-0 win here. I think we'll be talking about another show of Chelsea having all the space in the world, but exchanging passes sideways and not having someone to make the run because Hazard was not in a good day and he was being marked out of the game as sorts. And because there is also this that we should discuss later about the transfer window, how he's completely isolated. We are Hazard. I mean, I prefer to say we are Kanté Hazard FC, but we are Hazard FC and most of the
We are.
times.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, we have actually mentioned that in previous podcasts as well, that it has become to a worrying extent this Eden Hazard FC, and only reinforcements will change that. And I think that's a good point to, well, let's go over to the transfer talk, because if there is going to be someone who may contribute to us changing our ways, no longer being so reliant on Eden Hazard to score the goals, to produce the goals, or to assist them, then we need some good striker or a very good winger. And the most, well, I mean, the most prominently mentioned name, and I am a very, very reluctant to think about him joining. But if it happens, it happens. Is Christian Pulisic, or Pulisic as he's referred to in German? Well, it does seem as if, I mean, I think you actually mentioned this to me, Phil, that Eddie Johnson is actually a very prominent name in American football. I personally didn't know that. So him putting that up on an Instagram in his Insta story, that Pulisic will be leaving for Chelsea, does seem as if this thing's gonna go through.
I was a bit reluctant as you are in the past, but as I went on to follow his career and follow his performances at Dortmund, I saw that he's a very young guy with a lot of potential, who has. I mean, we can't deny that this also has a huge commercial factor behind it because you're basically purchasing the best American player that maybe has ever been brought up, in history. So and you're bringing him to your team, Premier League team, and Premier League gets a lot of attention in the United States. So you can't deny that that is also a factor to for Chelsea to purchase him. But on the pitch, I think he's very good. But if he does move from Dortmund, he will only do that during summer. So we won't be during the winter, and we need to look at other alternatives to our Wolves. And I mean, we discussed that previously as well. I think in terms of impact, a striker is more impactful than a winger in terms of goal scoring, conversion, and everything else because we are creating chances. Not they are
Yeah,
not
second most actually, if I'm not mistaken.
yeah, no, not that they are excellent as they are with Liverpool and City because we create a lot of chances, but they aren't. Today was a good show of that because we had a lot of shots in the first half, for example.
Yeah.
But I think we only had 2 shots from the bots, and it's ridiculous because Sahibol is about breaking through the bots. When you watch Napoli play, you saw Insigne and Mertens and Hamsik, and at times even Callejon breaking to the bots with a short exchange of passes and a dribble to finish the chance. And we are not doing that yet. I mean, I hope we will do that eventually, but at the moment we're not doing that. But to finish the chances that we are creating at the moment, we need a striker. I feel. However, I think it's better for us to just save the money and spend it during summer. I think we're fine with how we are playing as of now. I mean, I don't have lofty expectations about Chelsea. I think we are fine with a top four finish, and we are on pace for that. We in terms of numbers, in advanced statistics and everything else, we are set to be at least third. And I mean, if we finish in the top four, for me, it's all fine. So if we keep up this level of play. And considering that the players will grow into the tactics and stuff like that, I don't think we need, to go and purchase someone like Higuain or Carlo Wilson. I think we can save the money to spend on a younger and better player during summer. I don't know how you guys feel about it.
I don't think Higuain is. He will come on loan, and that was the cost us because. For the type of money he went to Juventus, they will always demand.
That, yes, about that. It's just ridiculous the cost of the whole transaction.
Yeah, maybe, but I don't think for the solutions he can offer us, I think it's a fair amount of money, and I would spend it. And of course, it is only a loan, and we will address our real issues in the summer, but. I think for the meanwhile, it is a good transfer to do. On the note of Pulisic, I'm not overly a fan of him. I won't lie, but as time goes on and as I learn more and more about the business and how we go about business and how Pulisic goes about business, the whole thing stinks for me. When I look at how Pulisic is advised, and it's his dad or some kind of family relatives that advise him to moves. You can always see if a player is in that kind of environment, they will always go for the money move. And they see now that Pulisic was a very early start in his career, and I think he made his debut aged 16 or 17 for Dortmund. Now that is 3 years ago. And he doesn't play the part anymore that he wants to play because clearly he's the third choice winger at the moment. He wants to go for that money move, and he has built a profile, and that's very good. I'm not saying it's bad to build a profile as a young player because ultimately you should cash in if you have a career that Christian Pulisic has. So no fault in that. But I think it's too much too early. He hasn't proved himself, and he does want to go to an English club because the Premier League is the most attractive league and the most watched league, certainly in the United States. And as it happens, Chelsea wants to build a profile in the United States, and everything comes down Millhouse. And Christian Pulisic joins Chelsea for 50 million apparently in the summer. The matter that the story was leaked is maybe down to that he is not advised by a proper person, but rather by family relatives. And the stories are spreading that way. I'm not happy about that, if I'm honest, especially if the deal isn't finally sealed. So other clubs tend to mug you off that way and maybe rise the price for another 10 million or something. And on the other hand, I don't think Christian Pulisic is like I have to draw a bigger picture there. When I was watching the documentary of Manchester City, like the All or Nothing documentary, and I was watching the way they go about their business, their transfer business. Like, first of all, they have a director of football there, a very good one, by the way. Yeah. And they were spending 150 million prior to that season. The documentary was recorded on fullbacks. Then 6 games into the season, Mendy broke his leg. And what they were saying was, all right, we spent 150 million, but if we need another fullback to win the league, we will spend that kind of money. We are not bothered whatsoever because we demand that title, and success is the highest priority in our club. And there's nothing that crosses that path. I don't see that with us. Like I see success maybe as the second or third priority, and we don't really have a kind of sense what we want at this club because there's a lot of senseless people in this club, and sometimes we go for the money move Sometimes we go for the PR move. Sometimes we go for the success move. And unfortunately, Christian Pulisic, or that move, if it happens, is another indicator that we don't have our priorities straight. And if we would have our priorities straight, even with that kind of money we have at our club, it's not Manchester City money, but we could still achieve great things. But I think it's just an indicator of kind of the dropping away of our club in the bigger scale. And I'm not happy about that.
Well, I mean that's the thing, you know. I agree with you on that last point, most certainly, because if you don't have that director of football, and that's also something we can address. Before I hand it over to you, Phil, in regard to the director of football, I've got to say the lack of a footballing understanding in that boardroom has been evident for quite a while now, and I don't. I know that we've made some very good signings, like for example, the acquisition of N'Golo Kante will always be one of the best deals this club's ever made. Well, maybe not, you know, Tenenbaum, Buck, and Mariner. They won't have an actual footballing IQ, I dare to say, but they will have some people that tell them who to pick, but they might not always listen. And that is, for example, the case in regard to Christian Pulisic, because I cannot fathom why anyone would tell them to buy him on the evidence that he has shown. I mean, stats are not everything. I'm fully aware of that. So he's only 20 years old. He can, of course, come good. But if we would have a director of football, I'm sure that he'd say, it's a risk. He could, of course, develop into what people wanted him to develop in for ages now at Dortmund. But it could just as well turn out to be, and I say this quite willingly, a second Willian. Willian may have contributed in his own way over the years, and we won 2 titles with him, so he did contribute. But there are clear facts why he has been such a frustrating player, and that his end product. We could have won so much more if he would have a higher footballing IQ and just be more clinical. And the thing is, it doesn't look as if that is the case with Pulisic. And if we would have a director of football, I don't even care if it's someone who isn't, as experienced in that occupation as, for example, Michael Ballack would be. He'd be more of a wild card. I mean, I loved Michael Ballack as a player at Chelsea, but he has no experience compared to, for example, what's his name, Campus from Lille, I think the guy was called, or what was his name from Roma? I can't remember the other.
Monchi.
Moji, yeah. So Moji, so
Monchi, Sabatini.
They would have a footballing IQ.
Yes. Those guys from Italy. I mean, entering this topic, I mean, unless you have more to say, of course.
I would only said one more thing, and that's
yes.
I think if we would only get one signing in, that will be an attacker, and get a director of football in this January transfer window, that will be a fantastic window for Chelsea Football Club. Only those two. Only one signing and just get a director of football, and that will be already a bloody fantastic transfer window for me. But over to you, Phil.
Going back to what Andy said about City, their spending capacity is so much higher than ours because they don't have to worry about FFP, basically about financial fair play. The revenue structure is just ridiculous because at any point in time they can inject money through their commercial revenue because they have the Abu Dhabi enterprises the enterprises funneling money into them, while we kind of had that with Roman, but Roman was, I think Roman was a tad more straightforward with it because he was, taking money from his own pocket and loaning to us. He wasn't just, doing what City does, which is, I mean, we all, I think most of us, we all read the Football League's articles that Kicker or the Spiegel, I think was the Spiegel, the had a series about a City's practices about revenue, and I mean it's just
I'm not sure. Yeah,
I mean,
rings a bell.
Yes, I can link that to you later,
Yeah.
and you will see
Oh,
that,
sure, yeah.
I read the book. It was Spiegel, and it was brilliant. Like,
Oh,
yes,
yeah.
yes, you know,
yeah,
and you see that they can just, produce money out of nowhere. We can't do that. We have to, go by the book and work with what we got. And what we've got is not a lot. It's not as much revenue as City has. So, entering the Pulisic field, as I said, it certainly has a commercial aspect to that. But when you see the aims that the board has, I read an interview. I think it was Guy Lawrence, who entered he was one of the directors in the board. He said that he wanted to have 30 to 45 sponsors at Chelsea by 2027, and at the moment we have 17. So we have to improve, because when you see United, they have like 70 or 80 sponsors, and this is one of the factors why they earn so much from commercial revenue, and we don't get a lot from that. There's also the stadium, that is another source of revenue that we stopped it, the development, because of all the political stuff involving Russia and England. Uh, in any case, we don't have as much room to work as City has, so it's more difficult to have this approach to transfers.
Well,
To
that's why you need the director of football. If you
Yes,
have
so
a
yes,
director
yeah,
of football,
yes, yeah, about the director of football that you mentioned, which was the bridge that I wanted to make. That I even wrote an article. I think it was in July or in August about this. That we have a business head board that, in terms of experience in business, is excellent. Is one of the best around the Premier League. But
yeah.
in terms of football, we have no experience outside I think of who was it? I even wrote his name here, but there is one. Yes, Barnard, the David Barnard, if I recall correctly. He was secretary. He was promoted to director, but he's like football operations director. He's not exactly a director of football. He's not in charge of transfers. So he goes by and works with the day by day stuff with regards to football, but he isn't the one like Eminalu, who we worked with transfers, and it was that bridge between the board and the manager. And I think the football the director of football role needs to be filled, not just because of the transfer aspect, that is of utmost importance, but also because of this relationship between the club, the board, and the manager, the coach.
Yeah.
Because we had
absolutely
Emenalo.
right.
Emenalo was someone who had to endure a lot of stress, and he was the scapegoat for a lot of years because
Until
of.
today, even today, there are still people. If you read, for example, the comments section, there's still people that don't actually just take the piss. They actually mean that Emanala is at fault for the conundrum, with us having a subpar,
Transfer windows.
yeah, subpar transfer windows and subpar squad.
Yeah.
Which is ridiculous.
But is it? Is it,
Baffles me.
Jimmy? Is
Oh
it?
God, I can remember us having this discussion the
Yeah,
first.
no,
we
no,
actually
I'm not, I'm not saying that he is in fault for everything. I just think he wasn't up to the standard we thought that he is, or most people thought that he is as a and of course it was at the end it was an open discussion, and of course the club wasn't ever in fault in their kind of way they thought about the situation, and of course it was all his fault, which turned out not to be true at the end of the day. But I
Yeah.
think Eminalo isn't that good of a director of football.
The,
At the
the
end of the
problem
day,
is, yes,
yeah,
yes. The problem is, for English standards, he was pretty good. That's the problem, because when I mean, I think it was in 2011 when we brought a AVB to the club, that he had full reign over transfers, and it was the when he brought Lukaku, and then he brought, I think 1 year later, he brought Courtois, and then De Bruyne, and several of the potential buys, the guys with potential who were cheap, coming from Belgium, and he was the guy who made these transfers. He was the guy to advise on these transfers because I recall reading an article by I think it was David Cohn at the Guardian about the setup that Chelsea have with regards to transfers. What happens when what happened actually when we had the director of football instated was that the director of football would reach a midpoint between himself and the coach, and he would make a proposal to the board, and the board would either reject or accept the player that they were seeking, or they would oh, we don't have budget for that, seek another player with a lower budget and so on. So, for example, when we purchased Papi Jibul, that guy,
That guy,
yeah,
that guy.
Giloboji, I remember his name. Yeah, when we bought him for like 3 million euros from Nantes, or 8 million. I don't even remember. But it was a year where we had a very limited budget for whatever reasons. I mean, Emenalo and Mourinho didn't have much room to work with. Meanwhile, the summer before that, the previous summer, we purchased Costa for 42 million, and then Fabregas from Barcelona for 30 million, and so on. So, much of the problems that we had with Emenalo stemmed from this disconnection between the board, the financial aspect of the club, and what the coach and the director wanted. Because I don't think the football director wants to undermine his own job. He wants to do well. He wants to do well during transfers.
I agree with that. But you see, I don't think it's the solution to all our problems. And I don't think even that if we had a director of football, it would work for us, because the mentality of the club is all wrong. Let's say we appoint someone. I don't even care who it is, if he's a good one or a bad one. I just want a person in charge who dictates the kind of players we get at the club, and that way he dictates the way we play football. But at the end of the day, if you do that, you need a manager who is kind of who does the things with the players. Like we discuss about the squad we have at the moment, and many people will say it's not a Sarri squad. Like, if we had a director of sport, there's no guarantee that this director of sport would Sarri provide the players he wants, because he's also someone who has to be who has to deliver for the people in charge, saying Bruce Buck, Roman Abramovich, all these people. So by saying that, I mean, if we continue to appoint the wrong managers for our director of football, whoever it might be, it wouldn't work out at the end of the day.
It has to be aligned. You have to. You need to have a philosophy.
Yeah, and that's my worry. So if we just do that and continue everything else the way it is, it wouldn't be more successful than it is now. So we have to appoint a strong person, either in let's say the director of football role, or in the manager role, who really pushes on and says, I don't rate Jose Mourinho for so many reasons, but one thing I always rated about him was the way he handled transfers. That he said he went to Ed Woodward at Manchester United I think after his first season, and said, I want these 4 names. And by the time the transfer window even opened, he had the 4 names signed. I think that's the way it should be. And if you have a manager who's doing that, and Sarri isn't that person, you need a director of football doing that. You need a strong person who tells the board, all right, that's the players we need because we want to be successful, and everything else doesn't count. Yeah. And I think that's what we need at the moment.
I agree with you, yeah, and I think that would solve a lot of our problems in that respect. I mean, problems, is it's not looking too bad. I mean, 3rd place, well, as we mentioned, after winning against Crystal Palace, looking kind of good. But I think that is also a point which has to be addressed in the near future, because if I'm not mistaken, there were reports already in the summer that said, now that the transfer window is open, Chelsea will be concentrating on actually appointing a director of football in the upcoming months. Well, now it's nearly January and nothing's happened.
Oh yeah.
At least
I
not
mean,
that we
Mariano
know
just took
from. Yeah.
Mariano just took the fun part of the job for herself, and he
Yeah, but that's
doesn't.
the problem. You
She
know,
doesn't want to let go of that.
a director of football has football in its name, in your title, and that means that she should have an idea. I mean, I know she's been in the business for a long time because
Yeah.
before that, I think she was, where was she? Somewhere in Russia, if I'm not mistaken, for quite a long time. I think she even did something with Vitesse as well at one point. But my point is, yeah, actually, of course she did because Kashia, because she's Georgian, isn't she? And yeah, anyway, point is, she will have already, gathered the one or the other thing, but a footballing mind is just different from someone who's in economics, and she is fully. I mean, she's good at what she does. If she,
Yeah.
to get the money out of stuff, and that she does very efficiently and very prolifically. But the problem is that you can't always just put that out into
You
footballing business as well, and
Yes,
that's the thing. And I think if she'd have that director footballer of football in place, even if it will be, let's say a former player who she would be able to, I'm not going to say manipulate because that sounds harsh, but form and shape as she likes to, then that
Yeah.
will work better. If she wants to do that, fine, but at least that would give us someone next to her, by her side who would give her advice. Because at first I thought, Gianfranco Zola maybe coming in, great, he can do that. But now he's in the coaching staff, and that's good. I thought he's done a great job, but he would have been good for that position probably. You can't say for sure, but yeah, no. So I think, as said before, if we would get in a director of football, a footballing director in January, and an attacker, whether that be a striker or a right winger, preferably a right winger from my point of view, as I've already elaborated on prior videos, then that would be fantastic. But that's unfortunately we can't always get what we want, and
Yeah.
it does seem as though that we will be in for a striker, to be fair, because now that Giroud rolled his ankle, I think that does. We are definitely getting a striker, whether that be the recalling of one of our loan army strikers or diving into the market. But something has to be done, because if Giroud's out for a few weeks and Morata's just not on form, and Sarri isn't really trusting him anymore, if he's already taking him out for tactical reasons, then something has to happen, and that is quite exciting, of course. But I wouldn't agree with your sentiment that you said before, Phil, about Callum Wilson, because I'm not too uh not too happy about that link, because even if we would buy him, he'd cost us about 50 mil upwards, and he would essentially be from the summer on a backup striker. And there's
Yeah.
no point spending that money on that kind of money or sums on a backup striker. I mean,
Ideally not. I mean, I fully agree with you, but we are just behind. We're just against the wall here. That's the problem.
oh, that's
As
true. No,
Yeah, as you said, Morata. I mean, Morata. I was speaking about Morata. If you allow me, I really like him as a footballer, but I hate him as a striker. That's the problem. I think he's an excellent footballer. I mean, as a player, you see how he does the correct runs. He has the great technique and everything else to make a good footballer. But when it comes to finishing his chances, he just sucks. And it's strange because his advanced stats, expected goals and such, he does so well in those, but he almost always underperforms. And I think it was one of you or either Yannick who said that he crumbles under pressure, or maybe I listened to that in another podcast. But I mean he's used to the backup role, and now that he's the main man, he just crumbles, and maybe that's what's happening with him. So which is something that happens with some players. They are used to not taking the spotlight, but when they do, they just fail to deliver, and they are much better as superb backups than as a man to lead the front line, which is like the opposite of someone like Drogba, for example, who was someone who even when he wasn't scoring goals, he was still a constant threat whenever he was on the pitch. I mean, and that's something that I really liked about Drogba, and is someone. I mean, we don't have this kind of striker anymore, which is very unfortunate. I think. I mean, when I was going through potential names for us to purchase. I mean, not this winter, but maybe in the summer. I remembered Pedro. Who's a player for Fluminense, which is my team here in Brazil. He's very good, and he's kind of that classic number 9 of sorts, but with speed and tenacity and everything that you need from a striker. But he plays in Brazil, which is a level a very, very, very many levels below the Premier League. So I don't know
Well,
how we
Gabriel Jesus has done it, and he stepped up
Yes.
directly from the Brazilian league, so might not be a bad shout. But unfortunately, when you mentioned Didier Drogba, I think world football doesn't do players like Didier Drogba anymore. Like looking
No.
everywhere, looking at every team, there's not
That's
many
true.
big characters in the game
Yeah,
these
yeah.
days, and that's unfortunately what we lack. We
Yeah,
always had the leading
exactly.
striker. At least when we
Exactly.
were successful, we always had the leading striker, the one who could deliver when nobody else could. And unfortunately, we have to move to different paths now. I think because you don't get these big name players who deliver on the constant basis like your Terrys, Lampards, Drogbas. Ain't a single player in our squad that is to that mental level that they were. But I think on that note, as we are 50 minutes going already, we can end that on plugs, obviously, as we always do. So I'm coming to you, Felipe. We enjoyed this conversation. Was a very thoughtful, a very deep rooted discussion where we had many things on the card. I certainly enjoyed it. So if people are interested, and I'm sure they are, where can they find you on social media, on whatever platform you want to plug here?
First of all, thanks for having me here. It was the first time that I was in a podcast. Although I've listened to podcasts since I was 14, and I'm at 26 at the moment. So it was my first. I'm really glad that you allowed me to be here. And you can find me on Twitter at Brasfuch, which is Brasfuch with Z. BRIAZFOOT, and also over at We Ain't Got No History, which is where Jimmy also writes. I'm really keen on transfer rumors, and I also do translations from Portuguese and Spanish to English to go through the mud that we have in regards to transfer rumors and such. I really liked it, and I really enjoyed the conversation with you. I mean, and sorry for any mistakes I've made. I was a bit
Don't worry about
nervous.
it.
No
Yes,
worries, no worries.
yes. I mean, I appreciate it, and follow me on Twitter and comment on wherever I write and stuff. That's it.
Make sure you do exactly that. As I will mention, what you should also do, follow the Attacking 2 on Twitter, follow Jimmy Funnel CFC on Twitter, follow myself, Andy _MA10, which stands for Martin on Twitter. Make sure you listen to our podcast on every possible platform there is. And also make sure you tune in next time when we will record the next episode of the Attacking 2 transfer special, which will be in the next week. Until then, keep the blue flag flying high.